The next module that we're going to look at is mindfulness and sensory at home. And I think we've touched a little bit on that already. So in the handout, this is something that you can go and look at because it goes into quite a bit of detail that we added here, is how to set up a chill space for your child at home. So I'm not going to read through this, but I am going to tell you what a chill space is. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. There are amazing examples of sensory rooms and things that schools have, or perhaps even some families have the privilege of having a sensory room at home. All our children do need different types of sensory input though, but not all of us can have sensory rooms at home. However, we want to show you and teach you how you can use whatever space you've got at home to change it into a little chill space, a little sensory corner, whatever you want to call it, with your child. I quite like the idea of chill space. But setting it up for your child and making sure that your child has access to it whenever they need to. So it can be under their bed if it's necessary. It can be an empty wardrobe and converting that into a little chill space. It can be a table with a dark colored tablecloth over it just to block out the bright lights, and just turning that little area into this sensory tent or sensory spot. In this sensory area, you are going to add the things that your child needs. And you'll find a few examples here in the handouts. In our intensive parenting course, again, we go through lists of things that you can consider, and we'll help you how to select things that are appropriate for your child too. But if you look at the examples in the handouts, this will give you a good basic idea of things that you can add to your child's chill space. So we want to consider different senses, really, and then try and find out what your child finds calming, if they're feeling overstimulated, perhaps if they're agitated, perhaps if they're too excited. What are types of sensory inputs, sensory toys, things to look at, things to touch, things to smell, things to listen to? What are things that help them calm down when they need that? Or when they're feeling lethargic, they're bored, they just don't feel like doing anything. What are things, sensory toys, sensory activities that help them to be energized again, to get some excitement going, to feel ready to move on? Now, these are the type of things that we want to add to our child's chill space. It's very important though. We want our child to be able to use the chill space independently. Saying that, we need to make sure that everything that goes in there is safe for them to use by themselves. This is really important. The reason for that is, if our child needs some time in their chill space, it's usually going to be those times when they need to take a break. They don't want input. They don't need input. And they definitely don't want someone telling them what to do all the time. Mostly it's going to be the times when they've had enough of someone telling them what to do, and they just need to get away, be by themselves for a bit. So those are the things that you want to add to their chill space. Think about things to squeeze, things to pull on, things to chew on, a chewy toy that is safe for them to use. And whatever your child likes, things that they find calming, as I said. Those are going to be the main things when you think about a chill space. Now, just one thing to think of. Okay, there's two things. The one that I find really interesting, and this is something that more than one autistic adult has actually told us when we research these chill spaces and setting it up for our kids at home. How do we get our kids to get out of there again? Because sometimes it's just so amazing. When will they ever feel like they've had enough and they're ready to come out again? But a few of them said, we don't have to worry about that, because they will go for the sensory input that they need. And sometimes it is going to take a little bit longer than other times. But when they've had enough, they will come out and they'll be ready to move on to something else, or to come and let you know what they're looking for or what they need. So this is something that we can keep in mind, especially if it feels like they are making use of their chill space quite often. That is a good thing. And then the other thing I wanted to mention, and this has happened over and over again, when we set up a chill space, it's possibly going to be with one of our kids in mind in particular. Yes. But often what happens is it becomes quite a cool little space. And other siblings see that this brother or sister of them, just they love spending time in this chill space. They've got the coolest toys in there. It's amazing to spend time in there. You might need to make one for your other kids as well. The reason for this is whenever your child that really needs a chill space, any child can do with one though, but we want them to have access to it, as I said, whenever they need to. When our child is starting to feel overwhelmed and they do need to make use of their sensory space, we don't want other siblings to be in there preventing our child from the sensory input that they need. So that is something to consider. If you think of a chill space, setting one up for your child, you might want to do a little area if it is going to be an issue for your other kids as well. Okay, there are a few things that you can consider, and on this one, you can go through this in your own time. Then with regards to mindfulness, this is something that's really, really important, but also something that often it feels difficult to do with our kids, because where do we start with a young child with mindfulness? So really all it means is being aware of what is happening right now, wherever I am, becoming aware of what I can hear, what I can see. And sometimes our kids are so aware of all those things that it becomes overwhelming. So in that case, mindfulness is also learning how to reset focus, really, but also calm down and monitor and really control the input that they are receiving. So again, in our intensive parenting course, we go through quite a few mindfulness activities and games that you can introduce even with young children, and it's starting slowly, and it should be that way. Ultimately, we want mindfulness to become a way of helping with emotional and sensory regulation, emotional regulation being a big part for all of us and for all our kids as well. Mindfulness is something that we should introduce as young as we can. Whenever our child shows signs of being ready for it, we can support them in starting with that foundation of mindfulness, just simple breathing exercises, just slowing down when things are becoming a little bit too hectic, and helping them to reset focus, to slow down and calm down again before they start becoming overwhelmed. It does, as it says here, take time and practice and consistency to learn any new skill though, and the same with mindfulness. This is a little game that you can try out with your kids. You don't have to use the template for it, but just an idea for it. You can do it at home, in the bedroom or in the lounge or wherever you spend time with your child. Or if you can do it outside or somewhere in nature where you just quieten down for, even if it's a few seconds, and teach your child slowly how to tune into what they can see, not talking in between, not pointing it out necessarily, but just for a few seconds, just being quiet and what can I hear? What can I smell? Things that I can feel, and what does it feel like? Oh, this is a fun one to do in the kitchen while you're cooking, perhaps. What things taste like, just slowing down again, instead of rushing through a meal, rushing through a game, tuning it down a little bit and really setting our focus on what can I taste right now? What can I hear? And it sounds really simple and it sounds really easy. It's not. I think we are so used to rushing through days, really, rushing from one activity to the next, or from work to home, to cooking, to getting the kids in bed. But it's really something to practice, and we can break it up. We don't have to do all these things in one activity. but perhaps teaching our kids as well, and for us, let's just lie down on our backs with our eyes closed. What can I hear? And most probably, if there's no loud, very clear sounds, perhaps your child might say, I can't hear anything. And for us, it even takes a little bit of practice. Redoing the activity. Okay, I could hear someone walking past. Let's close our eyes. Let's listen again. What can we hear now? Try and hear if you can hear someone's footsteps, or perhaps a kettle boiling in the background. And slowly start making them aware of those different smells or sounds or things that we can see. Thank you, Paula.
Thank you, Nanette. Sorry, this has been quite a few questions, and really thank you so much for all these questions. They are very valuable, and I feel like Sarai is answering them extremely well because she's got that personal experience. There's one that was sent to me about mindfulness that says, my child will not engage in any mindfulness activities. He only enjoys Spider-Man movies and playing with Spider-Man figurines. I can't get him to sit still and be mindful or present for more than a minute. And this is a question that's quite frequently asked in the chat box too. It's about the interest again, right? So your child is interested in Spider-Man movies and, you know, dressing, maybe you can even dress up like Spider-Man. You can go on a little quest together and see, is it Spider-Man or Batman that is going to be sitting still for the longest period of time? You really have to think about what are they interested in. They might not be interested in meditating or yoga per se, but that doesn't mean that you can't do mindfulness activities with them. So perhaps dressing up like a Spider-Man, and like I said, sitting still, or trying to shoot the web out like Spider-Man, and then really just focusing on that fine motor. And that's all being present in the moment. Or smelling, what do you smell? What does Spider-Man smell? What does Batman smell? And figuring out, because that is a mindfulness activity, right? Being present and using your senses. And then just, there are some other questions in the chat box about maybe a child not being able to be doing writing. I know that was one of the questions, and one of my answers was to maybe just look at what is he writing about. Like, is he writing about some of the things that he enjoys? Maybe start with fine motor activities, because a lot of times that is the case. That, well, most of the time, really, if you think about it, children don't like, we don't like things that we're not good at. So if his fine motor movements and strength is not up to par, then he is going to struggle to write. And I think then we can do a lot of other things like Montessori kind of activities, where we do Play-Doh, you play with your fingers and squeeze things and pull things, and really work on building that strength, and then introduce writing again, but in an interest-based manner, which is very important. Sorry, I took a little bit of a turn from mindfulness and sensory, but I'm just trying to stick with all the questions that are coming in.
Especially with something like, let's take writing, for example. If it is something that your child really dislikes, and it's something that is important for them to learn, as Carla said, bring in the interest-based activities again, but also just take some time to put the fun back into it, to show them the enjoyment of an activity. Yes, our end goal is for our child to be able to write down with a pencil in a book for school, for example, but sitting outside, writing in the sand about things that they see or about things that they enjoy, or writing out a treasure map to find some treasure, just finding those ways of making it enjoyable again. And when we've got that, then it's easier to build upon something that is interest-based as well, and something that there's some enjoyment in it then already.